Jill, it's a pleasure to welcome you. Just talking to you before the interview, you're doing an amazing job trying to bridge the gap between technology and the medical field. You saw the pains between how technologists come and try to create medical products and how the VCs don't completely understand the game. So you're trying to bridge that gap through your new business that you started called MDisrupt.
Correct.
So I'm delighted to learn more from you about this company.
Yeah, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here this year. So we founded MDisrupt in response to kind of our 10 plus years in Silicon Valley. My co-founder and I both started in like traditional healthcare backgrounds, her on the commercial side and me as a physician. And we came to Silicon Valley about 10 years ago and have been working as an executive in various health tech startups and kind of seeing the same missteps happening in the companies that we work at and in the other companies that we're watching in the industry. And it just kind of got frustrating to see that, potentially really impactful product ideas with these really brilliant engineers, designers, amazing talent and money to actually make these impactful products. But many of them aren't making it into widespread adoption because the tech community is unfamiliar with the formula to get there. And so we just really want to educate the investors because we really believe this starts with them. Just like they would do legal diligence done by a lawyer and do technical diligence done by an engineer, we feel like for a health product you should be doing medical diligence done by medical experts. And that way we can help identify the companies that have a lot of red flags that potentially become the next Ubiome or 23andMe or Theranos. And those are actually relatively easy to detect if you know what you're doing. But moreover, we really want to find the people who want to do it right and the entrepreneurs who want to get to market as fast as possible and responsibly and help them do that.
One of the interesting things about health tech is the ramp up is pretty long, life cycle is long, so you have to have the patience to withstand the market forces for the long time from the entrepreneur side. And on the investment side, obviously, you'll have to have even longer patience to make sure not only you're mentoring and guiding the entrepreneur, but you're having the deep pockets to withstand that kind of investment. So I'm trying to learn how you come in the middle and try to help these two groups together.
I mean, we see, especially early on in our corporate evolution at MDisrupt, we feel like our job is to educate the venture investor community to understand the longer timelines and why they have to be there, and then what the benefit is. And I mean, obviously the investors can see that the U.S. healthcare industry is like a $3 trillion industry, and it's the only major growth area for tech to go into. So we're seeing more and more traditional tech investors stepping into the healthcare space with very little understanding of that marketplace, and it's not a free market. It's very non-intuitive, but if you've been doing it and you have experience on it, it's a very obvious, well-worn path how to get to widespread adoption.
The other good thing that has happened over the last decade or more is the huge influx of interest of young entrepreneurs in this space. Tech has taken its own shape, as you know, but health tech is kind of emerging not only in the US, obviously it has its own parameters, but if you look beyond US into the emerging economies and the underdeveloped economies where there is, I think, the lack of, the medical products and medical services. So there's a huge opportunity out there, but the pricing has to come almost to negligible. So your thoughts on how these young, energetic entrepreneurs are preparing themselves and how the investment community is looking at, not necessarily from the profit point of view. Gates Foundation is a good example of that.
Yeah, so I think there's a trend in healthcare in developed countries and there's payment reform models that are happening that are encouraging this. But we want to get the people out of the hospitals and keep them healthy and well where they live and where they work, right? And this is kind of similar to now our ability to reach out into third world countries and access people where they live in ways never before, since there's mobile phones or smartphones are becoming so much more available, and you can ping information up into the cloud, analyze it, and ping it back down. I mean, that's fundamentally game-changing. And so this skill set of reaching people where they live and where they work, that is, like a core competency of consumer technology. And it's something that the incumbent healthcare system has virtually no ability to do or understanding of how to do it, right? So I just see this opportunity in the next 10 years. It's going to be game-changing. Medicine is not going to look like what it looks like now. It's going to be one of those things where, do you remember how when we used to have to go to the library before we had Google? Like, it's going to be that revolutionary.
The other important element in this equation are the insurance companies. So you have the developers, and the investors, the insurance companies. And these three have to be all together as the products are developed before they are deployed. Your take on how to work best, or better rather, with the insurance companies?
So there is, and I know it looks confusing and complicated from the outside, but there actually is a recipe for how you do this, and it's a well-worn path. It requires a really tight orchestration between your medical affairs team and your commercial team and marketing team to do this. And there's a checklist of studies that you need to do. There's data that you have to show that is essentially proving your product is safe, effective, and your claims about it you can substantiate. And then you need the health economic models around that too, because nobody can make a coverage decision without understanding the health economics, especially in comparison to current solutions that are available. And then the very last piece of data that they're going to need is some kind of prospective study. So real-world evidence generation is becoming more common now, but a randomized clinical trial is always best if you can do it. And it's at that point that you need to, again, be working all the way along with key opinion leaders in healthcare, so that as these studies are coming out, you can get them on the right podiums. You need to have the right message from the right person at the right time through the right channel. And experienced commercial people from the healthcare industry know exactly how to do this, and to get those studies out and get them amplified. And then when the time is ready, to get them into the professional society guidelines, because that's what's going to get you widespread adoption. Physicians, it's a very litigious career choice to be in, and so to avoid being sued, you have to stay close to evidence-based driven guidelines by your professional societies. And so you might get onesie-twosies in adoption here or there, but you're never going to get widespread adoption without getting into professional society guidelines.
Great. All those are great lessons that you have learned and sharing with the entrepreneurs and the investment community. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.